Welcome into another edition of New Track Record Podcast from the WELT studios here in Fort Wayne. Caleb Hatch and Justin Kinney with you, here to recap an exciting Bommarito Automotive Group 500.
Who would have thought?
Right? At the track formerly known as Gateway Motorsports Park. Hello, Justin.
Hello, Caleb.
How are we? You're hacking?
Yeah, I'm hacking, but it's just drainage. Change of seasons, too, I think.
Yes.
We've seen that. I mean, dropping into the 40s here in Indiana.
Fahrenheit, that is.
Yes.
Not Celsius.
Fahrenheit. No,
for our international audience.
Nor Kelvin. We are talking Fahrenheit. So, yeah, it's been a change and a couple of people sick in my house that have gotten over it, but I just have drainage. But we're here talking about the race at Gateway and preview the race we got coming up in Portland this weekend as we close in on the final few races of the season.
One other thought on, Fahrenheit versus Celsius, and, in the U.S. we have pounds and ounces, and I'm dealing with the metric system at the hospital because they weigh him in grams and then they convert. But like the conversions, like they'll say, oh, he's 20 grams, and it's like he's 3 pounds 0 ounces, but really it's like rounded up on the, so you really have to like look up to see how close they really are to that weight. It's confusing.
Are we the only country that
pretty much
use the metric system?
I actually read something about Canada, how they converted, I want to say in the late 70s, they converted to the metric system. It was pretty fascinating. Really? There were gas stations that were selling, like during the transition, they were selling gas by the gallon and gas per the liter, and like some of the gas stations were even advertising, hey, we sell both conversion rates,
right?
But they pretty much kind of forced their way in, and we're pretty much the only major country that does it this way.
I don't understand why. I was going to go back to the skit, if you ever seen it on Saturday Night Live, where it's like the founding fathers and stuff, and they're talking about all these things they're going to do in the new United States.
Yes.
And we're going to not do the metric system. And
I watched that the other day because it popped up on my social media feed with Nate Bargatze, right? The comedian.
Yeah. Yep.
And they're like asking, he's playing George Washington. They're asking him, so how do we decide this? And it, like nothing makes any sense.
No, nothing at all. He's talking about freedoms and all this stuff and pursuit of happiness, and we're gonna ditch the metric system. And we're like, why? But if you haven't seen it, check it out. But that's our enough metric system talk. We got plenty of racing talk to
plenty of miles
tackle.
Per hour to get into.
Plenty of MPH.
So Josef Newgarden wins a wild, dare I say, chaotic, entertaining, fun Bommarito Automotive Group 500 at Gateway. Now, we'll get into all of the other elements, late restarts and
crashes,
crashes,
middle
all
fingers.
Of that. But overall, let's start with the positive before we get into our three things. I think the biggest thing overall is that IndyCar, it's a complete 180 from what we saw at Iowa. That's the biggest thing to me, is we saw an entertaining race that, the crowd at Gateway wasn't great. It was probably in the 15 to 20,000 range. But this helps sell tickets, I hope. Now they're changing the date, and it'll be a day race again next year, so who knows? When you mess with date equity, it's never a good thing. But fans who are there in attendance were treated to an entertaining race, and to me, that's the biggest takeaway of all.
Kudos to the IndyCar team, the Firestone team, everything that was involved, everybody that was involved in helping Gateway not be a repeat of Iowa. And that was the fear. That was the fear from us. That was the fear from drivers testing at Gateway, was this is not looking good. But between the reduction of downforce and the new tire they brought, which was a new compound, and Gateway, maybe the biggest element is the lack of NASCARification of the track at Gateway in terms of putting anything on there or whatever, treating it.
No, they did put the resin down, but again, you have a 2-month gap.
Correct.
I think that also helps.
Yeah, in the summer and rain and all that stuff, kind of wiped away. So all that combination, kudos to everybody involved, because we were really facing And maybe we do. Maybe we go back to Iowa, at Milwaukee, and Nashville. But at the very least, we were looking at 4 of the final 5 races going, oh my gosh, are we going to watch more processional races like we had at Iowa? At least at Gateway, that was not the case. So credit to everybody involved. I had my doubts that IndyCar could seriously combat this problem before the end of the year. I was wrong. It was great to see, and hopefully it continues in the final 3 oval races.
And my one sense of optimism with it being an evening race and the temperatures are getting cooler. I mean, they even talked about it on the broadcast. Track temps were dropping. I think that impacted the racing, and the fact that, cars change the cooler the track temps get, and that was a factor. And we didn't know how much of a factor it would be, but I think having a couple early cautions prolonged the race and really kind of changed how it went. I think if we didn't have those early cautions, I think we could have been talking about a much different race.
I agree, and you were right with the track and with the temperatures. I mean, even with the qualifying.
Yeah, it was drastic in qualifying. That was in the afternoon.
And it was getting into the late afternoon, and you could see, and they were talking about the track having lower temperatures, and that impacted qualifying. So after watching that on Saturday, you felt pretty good, or Friday, you felt pretty good for Saturday with the temperatures lowering and creating more grip and changing conditions and then changing the cars. So there was a lot to like coming out of Gateway on Saturday night. And in the end, Josef Newgarden, my pick to win, by the way.
Yes, I picked Will Power.
He had a
flying chance.
He did. Flying chance is a good way to put it, and plenty of Will Power discussion later in the podcast.
For sure. So we'll do our 3 things. We'll also preview the BitNile Grand Prix of Portland, bitnile.com Grand Prix of Portland coming up this weekend. So we record here on Friday morning, August 23rd here in the U.S. And also get into some silly season stuff a lot around Alexander Rossi, Santino Ferrucci, Meyer Shank, so many teams. Prima. We have a lot of good silly season nuggets that came out this week. Plus, we'll even have an international race rumor to get to. Always fun to have that on an episode.
Yeah, the mailbag was fruitful with little tidbits.
Very much so.
We'll tackle those.
So we get to our 3 things from the Bommarito 500, and I think my number 1 takeaway, Josef Newgarden is the villain that IndyCar needs. That's my number 1 takeaway. A lot of people kind of made this point, and I posted a poll, who's the villain in IndyCar? Is it Newgarden or Ferrucci? And a lot of people said, well, Ferrucci's not good enough. And to be fair, you have to be winning races to truly be the villain that resonates with a fan base. And I think that's what Josef Newgarden has done. Yes, he struggled this year, but he's won the Indy 500 back-to-back, and he wins at Gateway, a track he dominates. There's still 3 more oval races coming up. Penske's won every oval so far this year. Do we see a complete season sweep on that? We'll talk about that in the points championship as well. But to me, NASCAR has their Kyle Busch, right? And I guess Denny Hamlin is also kind of seen by some as a villain.
Yeah.
But I would say Kyle Busch and Kyle Busch, unfortunately, has kind of fallen off.
Right. But in his heyday,
in his heyday, he was very much the villain. And that's what Newgarden and the role he provides. And that's great to have a really great driver as your villain. It's generating attention. It's keeping IndyCar fans engaged in the sport. I mean, if we had a repeat of Iowa, people are checked out probably the rest of the year.
Yeah, for sure, especially with football, getting started, college football here in the United States with week 0 this week before really getting started next week.
Do you think Newgarden is a bigger villain than Ferrucci now?
Yes, because of the circumstances this year. And Ferrucci, while he's had a very good season,
he's not contending for wins.
Yeah, he's not contending. He's not in position to be a villain up front late in races.
Well, and the thing about Newgarden this season that we're seeing that's different, I think, from previous years. I mean, the Indy 500, he didn't lead very many laps. Now, to be fair, he didn't lead very many laps last year either.
Right.
In this race, he didn't lead very many laps. He led 17. So he's found a way to be in position to win when it matters. He's not dominant like he's been in the past at other ovals in previous years, but his ability to get to the front, and yes, you can talk about, well, he spun and caused the yellow and lost like 2 spots on track. that's luck of the draw. To be fair, Colton Herta spun, at Iowa. Yes, he lost more spots because it's a shorter track.
Right.
But, I mean, his race wasn't over, and Newgarden's race wasn't over. That's just luck. Now, the restart, we can get into that later. But I think, to me, that my number one takeaway is we have a true villain for the first time in IndyCar where it's a consensus. I'm trying to think of the last time we had someone who was kind of like this, and Newgarden doesn't shy away from it. Now, he's not embracing it, but he's also not shying away. I mean, do we go back to Paul Tracy? Has it been that long?
Yeah.
Was it Will Power, like 10 years ago, 12, 15 years ago? I don't know.
It's a good debate to have. I think I would say Will Power is the most recent. And I think we need to talk about the restart.
So that's your first takeaway?
Well, was that your first takeaway too? Is that
no? Newgarden being the villain was my first takeaway.
But let's talk about Josef Newgarden as the villain and the restart, because I had zero problem with what Josef Newgarden did. The problem I have is maybe in the rule book, and I'll explain. Josef Newgarden never accelerated then decelerated, unlike what Will Power was saying. There's clear evidence to discount that accusation with the onboard and everything. That Josef Newgarden
IndyCar said he maintained a consistent slow speed around 80 miles per hour. Now that can mean slightly above and slightly below.
Yes.
People posited on the broadcast that there were flames coming out of the back of his car, but apparently that was just reflections from signage around the track.
Yeah.
Now, drivers will put their foot on the brake to kind of like roll the brake a bit before a restart.
Right.
So that's been debunked. What he did was within the rules. And I looked at the rule book because people actually, sent some messages asking about the rules. Like, there's nothing against the rules with what he did. The problem is the light was clearly green and he had not restarted, which is their race control is supposed to go green once the leader essentially starts. Now,
correct. But if the leader doesn't start,
and he was past the restart zone,
well,
if that's the case,
that's the thing is, like, IndyCar said he was within the restart zone. My thing with and I point towards, I'll blame two entities with what happened. One, race control. You're the one that needs to tighten up the rules and say, okay, when you see green, you need to start. But two is on Alexander Rossi. And here's another thing with IndyCar too, is they've not allowed drivers to fan out a little bit.
Correct. And Rossi said on Off Track this week that has apparently changed. I've not seen that confirmed anywhere.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, that's the change this season that's really changed restarts on ovals and made them even more chaotic.
Correct.
I think the biggest thing to me that Newgarden did, he found a loophole in the rules, as people do in racing, and I think it should just be simple, and that the green is from the starter stand, and that green flag waves and you go. All this nonsense about they monitor telemetry with the leader and then have we overcomplicated racing? Because that's what it feels like with how the rules set up currently.
I mean, you look at it, it's like, and here's the thing too, is the lead, because how many times have we heard the leader is in charge, in control of the restart?
Yes.
Okay. So if that's factual, then the driver is going, particularly Alexander Rossi, accelerating when the people in front of him were not yet accelerating. That's on him. It's like when you drive on the street. It may be green 5, 6, 7 cars in front of you, but if the car in front of you hasn't gone, you're not accelerating. And that's my thing. Is I know it's different with racing and regular driving, but in that respect, it's not. If the cars in front of you aren't accelerating, you don't accelerate. And I know it's every edge you're trying to get, but to me, the incident was caused by Alexander Rossi accelerating when Will Power and those in front of him had not yet accelerated. And with IndyCar not allowing the fan out to kind of prevent drivers from getting a jump on the green, then those are the incidents you're going to have. And if you're going to stick to that rule where you have to stay behind the car in front of you, then you have to reinforce to your drivers, the start is on the leader. You don't go until the leader goes. And those are the rules. And so I think IndyCar, instead of trying to appease teams in this respect, needs to lay down the law and say, look, this is the rule. The leader is in charge of the restart. If you crash somebody, if you wreck somebody in the field behind him, That's on you because you shouldn't go until he goes.
The other thing is IndyCar had the ability, and Newgarden pointed this out. He was kind of tweeting through it after the race with fans, and a lot of fans were accusing him of stuff, and other fans were sending him dog pictures. Go figure. But he pointed this out, as did, I think, a fan tweeting at him. But look, IndyCar had the ability to wave off the restart, and I think they probably should have.
Yeah, I don't know if it was too far gone, too close, making that snap judgment, that snap decision. If you try to wave it off quickly and guys are already starting to accelerate, then that's a potential for disaster, and then you have another whole issue to deal with. I just think that just dumb it down. And what we have, look, Josef Newgarden, the restart zone is here. It is on him in some point in that restart zone to accelerate. And if he doesn't, then it's a penalty. But it's on you behind him to not go until he goes. Alexander Rossi went before Newgarden went. And I go back to being on the road. Just because it's green in front of you, if the cars aren't moving, you shouldn't accelerate. And not very many people are putting on an Alexander Rossi, but I am.
I think Newgarden knew what he was doing and kind of had a sly trick up his sleeve. I don't,
which is within the rules.
Yeah, I think it's more that they need further clarification and better procedures, because just how the restart procedure is done, to me, feels over officiated, but under I don't even know, under something in the terms of application.
Right.
Like they've complicated it so much that you can get nonsense like what happened Saturday night happen.
Right.
And a lot of, look, when you have multiple drivers and multiple teams upset, and the fact that it's a Penske car, you're going to have a firestorm. That's just reality.
That's the biggest thing, is the more often this happens. Here's the problem, is when you have one of the most successful teams in the series also own the series, and there are going to be issues. This would be different if it was Foyt that owned IndyCar, because they're hardly ever up there when it matters, right? But Penske's always up there when it matters. So any issue that's brought about that's seemingly in favor of Penske, people are going to say, well, they own the series, blah, 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 which I have a hard time buying into. It's bad optics, but I don't think there's anything nefarious going on, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, beyond what already happened.
What I'm saying is that in cahoots with the series, like the series showing favoritism to Penske. I don't think they do that. I think conspiracy theorists like to look into that. I'm not saying Penske isn't trying to subvert the rules, but I don't think they're in cahoots with who runs the... I don't think Jay Fry is... looking over his shoulder and like, I have to make or race control, and looking over their shoulder saying, we're going to make this call or not make this call based on who owns the series.
I don't think Kyle Novak and Max Pappas and Ari Leindyke and whoever else is up there, I think they may have like a fourth rotating, I can't remember, but those are the three main people. I don't think they're purposely, making rules, but or not making rules against Penske, but perception is reality. And we didn't have this problem the previous few seasons, but because Penske blatantly cheated, now everyone's going to have that in the back of their mind for any situation. You can't deny it. And I don't think it's just a social media thing, not after you have one of your top drivers, I guess 3 of your top drivers technically, cheat and get caught. Now, one technically didn't do anything wrong. They just had access to the software. But the other 2 definitely did. One apologized. The other went on this weird press conference, very ill-advised from a PR standpoint. It's still unbelievable that he did that. And then basically said, it's too good to be true to believe it, but believe me. Like, that's not helping your case here.
Right.
And when you have Brian Herta basically saying that there's a contingent of the paddock that believes there are iniquities in how the races are officiated. It's a growing feeling. Maybe I'm the first one to say that, but it's what people feel. When that's said out loud in an interview, it's not just a social media firestorm. It's what people actually think.
Yeah,
True or not.
True or not, but a perceived issue is not an issue.
The bigger issue I have is Will Power not getting a penalty for taking out David Malukas. Now, granted, he crashed on the next restart, So essentially, it took care of itself.
Right.
But that was a clear penalty for avoidable contact.
I would agree, and maybe the penalty was coming.
Yeah, once they went green, which is common. They would do like a drive-through.
It's not right away. So I would have been surprised if Will Power hadn't got that.
Colton Herta got a penalty for blocking that was justified.
Correct. I just feel like there are so many instances in which Penske isn't going to be involved with things because they're a top-running team, front-running team, that there's going to be things that are construed as favoritism. I have a hard time buying into that. I really do.
I would believe you, but when you have team owners and other influential people also believing it adds smoke to the fire.
But my thing is, a perceived issue doesn't necessarily mean there's an issue. And
True.
I think has Penske owning the series given team owners ammunition to finally have something against Penske? Before, you just couldn't beat Penske, and that's the way it is. Now, you can't beat Penske, but you have this excuse that you can point to that say, well, they own the series. That's kind of what I'm looking at it as. Now, the St. Pete issue gives ammunition to those teams.
And that's where it's coming from.
Correct. But I have a hard time buying into inconsistent race control. And how many times we talked about this? Race control across the board is inconsistent.
Yes.
So I think, it's probably inconsistent with Penske because it's inconsistent with everybody. That's why I don't think it's an issue. I think it's a perceived issue because race control is not consistent. But that's not just a Penske-only thing. It's a paddock-wide thing.
It's also funny to look back at how all the team owners said when Penske, bought the series in 2019, how great, he's going to be great and now the last year plus, they're all complaining. And I get it. Things have changed. You got through the pandemic period where teams are just trying to survive. And now it's full throttle again the last couple seasons. So things have changed a lot, obviously, but I do find it funny that we've shifted from that in 5 years.
Well, there's definitely things that Penske has or has not done with the series that has rubbed ownership the wrong way in across the paddock. But I also think that I come back to it for a long time. Teams just had nothing to throw at Penske for their dominance. Now they feel like they have something, and every little perceived slight gives them added reinforcement to throw it out there and see. And I have a hard time buying it. Race control has plenty of issues in IndyCar. It's not just a race control / Penske issue. It's a race control issue, period. And I think with Will Power getting taken out in that late incident, that's a Penske driver, right? So it's not like non-Penske drivers or Penske drivers weren't affected by the start or the late restart by Josef Newgarden. It directly impacted them. It directly impacted Will Power's any chance he had of competing for a championship. It directly impacted a Penske driver's race.
Yeah, there's no team orders, which we know. No change there.
But I don't blame Newgarden because Newgarden is a driver that will find any iota of ability to have an advantage over his competition. And if race control or the rule book gives him an inch, he's going to run with it. Whether you can't say that did he sandbag? Probably. Okay. And he even admitted it, that he was slow on that restart. He was late on it on purpose to try to everybody to hesitate and then he get a jump. That's strategy. We see it all the time, especially on road and street courses, right?
Yes.
And so I don't think Newgarden did anything wrong. You could say race control or the rule book needs to be tightened up, but I can't blame Josef Newgarden. He's an easy target based on what's happened this year and people's opinion of him on and off track. This one I'm not blaming on him.
All right. That's enough talking about a guy who's 8th in the championship.
What's your 2?
That's all I'm going to say. My number 2, Alex Palou. If there was any doubt, he basically wrapped up the championship on Saturday night.
Was it luck, skill, both?
Both.
Yeah.
It's always both.
Yeah.
Luck is when preparation meets opportunity, right?
And
Alex Palou avoiding the launch was just comical. Like, you see the replay,
Yeah.
his car off to the side. I'm like, of course.
He's the new Scott Dixon, right?
Yeah. So he wrapped up the championship. We go to Portland, one of his better tracks. Then you have a couple ovals left, but I think he's all but wrapped up the championship. Colton Herta, 59 points back. He's had a great run. Look, both of them have had 3 consecutive top 5s. Palou's gone 2nd, 4th, and 4th. Herta's gone 5th, 1st, and 5th. So they've been excellent. But Herta's got to win a race, probably 2, to even get into it. Everyone else, look, it's going to take Alex Palou crashing out of a race, finishing like 25th or worse, collecting the minimum 5 points for anyone to catch up. That's just the reality. And I don't see that happening.
No, and that's the problem. You're running out of opportunities to get within striking distance. Is he going to have 2 of the next 4 races 20th or worse? Because that's what you need.
Yes.
To have to be able to pass him. He's had 1 bad finish this year. 2 if you count Detroit, I guess. But other than that, it's been 5ths or better. He's been 16th at Detroit, 23rd at Iowa. So,
and then no finishes outside the top 5, which is unbelievable.
Yes, which is just crazy. So when you look at his performance, counting on a couple bad finishes when he's only had quote unquote 2 bad quote unquote bad finishes in the first 13 races, it's hard to convince me that that's going to happen. And opportunity was there once again this weekend for Colton Herta. He spins when he qualifies. Yeah, bounced back and finished 5th, but he had a car that you felt if he could start close to the front, had a chance to win this race.
Which, I mean, he was going to start in the top 3.
Right, because he was on, lap 2 of his run. And spins it, has to start 25th. Now, kudos to him battling back to finish 5th.
He passed, 7 cars the first lap?
Right.
The start of his race was unbelievable.
So he screws up an opportunity. You look at Will Power, already talked about him screwing up an opportunity.
Scott Dixon couldn't make the strategy work.
Couldn't make the strategy work and shockingly got bit by the unlucky bug, which we've hardly ever seen, where he pitted and then the caution came out and he was 2 laps down. And it was funny moment when Townsend Bell and James Hinchcliffe were kind of arguing back and forth on if it was a good thing or a bad thing for Scott Dixon that the yellow came out and James Hinchcliffe had to correct Townsend Bell. But once again, opportunity there for Herta, Dixon, and Power to do something.
And McLaughlin, he won the pole. I mean, he's got to pretty much win races at this point. And second's great, but that's not going to get you in the title fight.
So the combination of Palou staying out of trouble and with that penalty, had to start 16th too, make no mistake. There was an opportunity there for other drivers to capitalize, and they just didn't. And Palou staying out of trouble, bringing it home in one piece, a 4th place finish. He's your champion. We said it weeks ago that he was going to win the championship. I think it was after Laguna Seca. We were like, yeah, this is going to be over. And he's had some spurts, or the Iowa race, Iowa won, but nobody has been able to put consistent results together behind him. We talked about it last podcast that no driver has more than 2 podiums consecutively in this series this year, and that's what is needed to have a chance to catch Alex Palou, coupled with a couple bad results. It's just not there for anybody else.
And this stat from Steve Wittich, Alex Palou has started 10th or worse on 5 occasions this year, finishes in those races 4th, 5th, 5th, 4th, and 4th.
Pretty crazy.
Again, that's why he's in the spot he's in. What's your number 2?
My number 2, let's look around and see what we got here. I think you look at David Malukas, and I know the finish wasn't there due to the wreck, but qualifies 2nd. He led some laps, I think, 10 or 11. Just with every race, he is proving to be more and more of a big catch for Foyt for next year.
And there's more on that we'll get to in silly season stuff, but he was legitimately going to be a podium finisher and contend for the win. If he stays in the strategy he was on, he was looking really good. So I think for him and that Shank squad, the speed they found this year, A, has been phenomenal, and B, for him to sub in what is perceived as the number 2 car for that team and be consistently as good as he has been, and Felix Rosenqvist battled back to finish 6th after kind of having a struggle and having to drive through the field a little bit as well with an engine penalty, grid penalty. But that team, I think, is, you could argue, outside of Penske, Ganassi, Andretti, could you even argue to put them above McLaren in terms of balance? Like, I get they haven't won any races this year,
right?
But McLaren's only had one driver win a race, period, in their existence.
It's
tough.
tough.
You put them on par with McLaren even?
It's close, I think, and so
they're clearly ahead of everyone else.
Right, definitely. So, it's very impressive what they've been able to do, and sending that ladder in terms of other teams around them. So, it's very impressive. I mean, what Malukas is going to bring, and we'll get to some silly season rumors here in a little bit, but it sounds more and more likely that Ferrucci is going to be that other driver at Foyt. I mean, Ferrucci and Malukas next year with the momentum gained this year with Foyt, you had 2 guys, both their drivers finished in the top 12 at Gateway, and looking pretty good for the leader circle now. I mean, granted, 4 races to go, but now on the good side of the leader circle, I mean, there's a lot of momentum for Foyt, and Malukas personally has a lot of momentum, and he's going to take that to Foyt after the next 4 races.
All right, my number 3. I got to shout out a driver who had by far the best race of his IndyCar career.
Linus Lundqvist?
Well, he tied because he had a podium at Barber. Nolan Siegel.
How about that?
He gets the pit road speeding violation along with Ferrucci late. You think his race is completely ruined. Survives the chaos. Finishes in 7th after starting 20th. Led some laps, was on the same strategy as Scott Dixon at one point, and even was battling with him on track. This was a huge step up for him, and I think a massive confidence builder for Nolan Siegel, not just for the rest of the season, but I think going into next year.
Well, and he was a guy that felt like there was more to get at Gateway. Felt like he had a car that could have been on the podium if he didn't make a mistake. And so, very impressive what he has been able to do this season. And do you feel any more after the last 4 races or so? Do you feel any more confident that he can be a success at McLaren next year and beyond?
I definitely do after seeing what we saw Saturday night. That was where I really saw the flashes.
Yeah.
And for him battling with Dixon for those couple laps, it felt like he needed something to give him confidence, and this is going to give him a lot of confidence.
And I think those are the performances that McLaren wants to see heading into next year as well. This is why they signed him. And seeing flashes like this, nobody's expecting him to be in contention for wins right now. Maybe that's not even fair next year, at least in the first half of the year. But if he can have some good showings, race competently, respectfully, make some moves on some vets like we saw with Scott Dixon on Saturday night, bring it home in a respectable position, those are the things that McLaren wants to see. And for the majority of at least the last 3 ovals, the Iowa processional races and then at Gateway, Siegel has been pretty darn competent out there.
Yeah, no, I would fully agree. What's your third takeaway?
Well, I'll bring up Linus Lundqvist because I think he's a guy that could the drive that we saw him display in his first ever podium secure a seat for him next year. Maybe it's not with Ganassi. Maybe it's a farmed out to MSR type thing, but could we look back on this run by Linus Lundqvist and say, yeah, that was the race that he solidified his 2025 ride, whoever it may be?
I think with him, it's tough because we know that Ganassi's not going to run 5 cars next year. That's a lock.
I mean, wouldn't you be surprised if the rookie of the year isn't in a ride next year?
I would. I would be. There's so many dominoes, and we'll get to it in silly season, but he's not at the top of the list, and he's not even like in the middle of the list. That's the problem.
But I think performances like we saw on Saturday help that. His second podium, because he finished on the podium at Barber, right? I think.
Yes.
So second podium, his career second podium of the season. I think if he can have a couple more top 10 runs over the final 4 races, I think all of a sudden it comes back into focus for him, whether it's Ganassi, MSR, somewhere else. I mean, the issue with him is there's not a lot of money that he brings, but at the same time, if he can wheel it, somebody will sign him. So that was a huge, huge performance for Linus Lundqvist on Saturday night. We will see if that leads to further success this week and beyond, but also solidifying opportunities for him next year.
Other notes to get to from this race. Can you name the only driver who has 4 straight top 10s?
Yes, because you told me this, and I would not have guessed in a million years. Rinus VeeKay.
4 straight top 10s for Rinus VeeKay. He finished in 10th, so he was 5th at Iowa 1, then 9th, 8th at Toronto, and then now 10th at Gateway. So it's been a very good run for him. Only driver in the series, like I looked it up, he's the only driver with 4 straight top 10 finishes. So that's been a huge boost for him. He's 15th in the standings. He needed some good results to close out the year, and he's done that so far. Nothing on TV. I don't know if we'll get a TV rating. It started on CNBC because Xfinity went over at MIS. It started raining, then they red flagged, then they went and finished, of course, and that took like a whole other hour. But lap 26, I believe, is when IndyCar joined on USA. At least people got an entertaining race. I don't think we'll get a TV number out of it. Then any other final thoughts on this event?
I am just very surprised that we came out with so many good vibes out of this race. We felt like, this could be another brutal, brutal race, and we had the opposite. I mean, 21 lead changes.
Which was a record for that track.
Which was a record, yeah. I mean, multiple leaders, multiple storylines, a myriad of strategies. You had strategy A, you had strategy B, you had strategy C, you had 2A, 3B. I mean, it was just all over the place. And it was everything that we hoped and wished Iowa would have been. And kudos to IndyCar, everybody involved. Hopefully it gives a boost to the future of Gateway on the schedule next year. The crowd, what's it, comparable to last year, would you say?
Yeah, maybe.
I felt like it wasn't appreciably up or down from last year. Hopefully the show was good for those in attendance and we can have a banger next year. But just felt much more positive than I thought I would be coming out of Saturday night.
And if you want to go next year, Chris Blair, who's the promoter, they're already working on their IndyCar ad for next year and said it's pretty easy when the entire race was a highlight reel. And also they're offering, and I don't know if this is still valid, but they're offering weekend tickets, 2 days of racing. They have different levels, $33 for GA, $66 for silver, $99 for gold / the finish line. So you get everything, both days, IndyCar, lights, USAC, Silver Crown, again, June 14th and 15th next summer. So,
very nice.
Very good deal if you want to go back or make your way to Gateway for the first time. And again, $99 for 2 days is a good deal when you get 3 races, inclune an IndyCar.
And in
race.
June, right? So maybe prior
mid-June.
to maybe you'll be a little bit more lucky, won't be in the heat of the summer.
June 15th, and yeah, it could be worse.
I think you're more. There are better chances to avoid 90s in June than August. It's not guaranteed, but you have a better chance.
All right, if you agree or disagree with us, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can always find us at newtrackrecordpodcast.com on the web. While you're there, sign up for the email list. It is free to subscribe. You'll get email announcements for new episodes and any special announcements as well. You can check out our store. We have t-shirts and stickers on there as well. Plus, you can follow us on social media, IndyCar Podcast on Twitter /X, also on Instagram, on Facebook, search for New Track Record. And you can email us, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com, and support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. And as always, download and listen in for free on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Cast, YouTube Music, Overcast, Castbox, wherever you find your podcasts, and listen and download for free. Okay, mailbag time. We start with Rate the Race, and we both agreed on a number.
We did.
8.5. Now, ironically, the average of our Rate the Race responses, I also find it interesting. The more entertaining a race is, the more responses you get on Rate the Race. Go figure. 8.6. So we're pretty much right in line with what people thought. Now, there are a lot of people sending multiple numbers. I can't.
No, come on. You get one number. It's like the people fill out. It's like multiple bracket people.
Yeah.
You don't get multiple brackets.
You get one number. Yes. Now, if you say you have one official number, they're saying like, well, the first half was this, second half was this. I'm not just averaging
it together. You average it, right? Not us.
Yeah.
Give
me one number. One
number, folks. Just like one bracket. You have a bracket of integrity. You have a Rate the Race number of integrity.
All right. That's my rant. That was Rate the Race. Some responses on this. You posted this. Kudos to IndyCar for Saturday's race. After Iowa, we expected the worst. Superb effort all around to improve the show. You talk about the downforce, the tires. Several responses on this. Lynn_IndyCar said, Jay Fry and company did an amazing job on this race. Poet Shevchenko, hopefully the right lessons could be applied to Milwaukee and Nashville, even though those are two very different tracks. And NK Harden said, totally agree. Firestone, IndyCar, and Gateway, credit to all. It was better in every way than Iowa. Should give people optimism for Milwaukee. Let's hope.
Yes.
I don't think Milwaukee's going to be horrendous, but it's a completely different track. I mean, there's like no banking. It's really flat. It's a shorter track, 1 mile oval. We'll see, but at least you have some optimism for a couple weeks' time.
And that's the thing. And here's the thing too: is IndyCar and the drive. We love to talk about the versatile schedule. You have short banked ovals. You have short flat ovals. You have super speedway, right? You have road and street. It's difficult for Firestone and IndyCar to come up with perfect packages for every single one of these tracks. You look at NASCAR, you say, okay, mile and a half, most of them are pretty much the same. So a mile and a half package that will work here will also work here, here, here. And NASCAR has a vastly more of a budget to play around with things and try to find that perfect spot. But look at the ovals that IndyCar has. You have Indy, which is obviously its own thing. And then you have Iowa, which is a short banked oval. You have Gateway, which is a slightly bigger oval than Iowa. Then you go to Milwaukee, that's about the size, but flat. I mean, there's no banked. And then you go to Nashville, which is kind of your cookie cutter mile and a half, right?
Mile and a quarter.
So they're all different tracks.
But it's concrete, so it's a totally different
surface, right? So
1.330.
There you go. So they're all vastly different tracks from each other, and in regards to ovals. So it's not easy, particularly with the limitations in budget that IndyCar and its partners have. That's not an excuse, but it's also reality in terms of what works here may not work here. What doesn't work here may work here, and that's kind of what IndyCar fights all the time.
Now, another big element coming out of the weekend, and there's a lot of good stuff in the Racer.com mailbag where Marshall Pruitt initially said he kind of feared Rossi would be on the outside looking in for a full-time seat, but then we kind of read otherwise from the Indy Star where Nathan Brown talking with Rossi's dad, Peter, who's his manager, saying, 90% sure he'll be in a full-time ride. They've had talks with a lot of different teams. I thought it was interesting that he didn't mention Ray Hall's team by name. He just said one other team. I don't know if that means anything. Probably not.
Marshall says that,
and then Marshall kind of reversed course in his latest article, saying they're getting closer to finding a new home in the paddock. It's not bleak.
If you had to predict, I mean, would you say MSR right now is the leader?
I would say so. Rossi's dad said Juncos, Prima, ECR, Ganassi, MSR, and one other. So is the one other Ray Hall? I would assume.
I mean, there's only a couple left of those.
Yeah. Name half the teams there.
Yeah. Could it be hired by Ganassi, run by MSR? Would that surprise you?
No, it wouldn't.
Because I think we're pretty confident that it's going to be Palou, Dixon, Kiffin, Simpson, right?
Yes. And sorry, that was Marshall Pruitt's article. I had the 90% number. But Nathan Brown had a great read kind of going through all the options on this as well, IndyStar.com for that. Look, the way I see it, his best option is Shank. I think the most realistic option is Prima because they want an established driver to complement, now rumored to be Robert Schwartzman, coming over from F2, will be in the other seat. That's the hot rumor that Pruitt said. Now, there's another rumor out there that Callum Ilot's the other driver, which that would fit an established IndyCar driver. Can't forget about him. So
Correct.
That from Tony Donahue. So we'll see, but I think the best option for Rossi, you go Shank, and then I would go Rahal, and then I would go Prima.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because I don't think Ganassi is a realistic option.
I don't think so.
Now, Nathan Brown did have in his article that, and there are a lot of good tidbits. Like Auto Nation could be on the way out. Now, you look at their cars; they're more of a secondary sponsor, and Arctic Wolf has been kind of the primary sponsor for that second entry for most of the season. So it's not like a complete.
No, but
this team's doomed. But
right.
Also, Shank didn't offer Malukas. And Chevy has no room for Andretti because we also got confirmation, this isn't a surprise, but Ganassi and Meyer Shank are linking up in a technical alliance. And Shank insists that they can pick the drivers.
Yes, which sounds about right, but no surprises there. It'll just be a storyline to continue to watch with Alexander Rossi because we know he's valuing himself at a certain number and wanting multiple years. And it sounds like there is enough interest from multiple teams to probably get that from somewhere. Is it going to be with a top team or a new team? We're not sure.
So I posed the poll question, where will Rossi drive in 2025?
Okay.
Nearly 32% of you said Meyer Shank. 29% said Prima. Just basically 19.5% each said Ganassi and Rahal. Several replies. Lynn_IndyCar said it's not CGR due to the charter system unless they run more than 3 cars. Kojo617 said outside of IndyCar. Atlantic Cat 99 said IMSA was my thought. I also think the IMSA element for Shank is enticing. Ram TX22 said wish Pato would leave for Ganassi or Penske. Historic Hot Lap said prior to MSR switching to Ganassi Alliance was anyone's guess, but I think for the longevity and opportunity, MSR makes the most sense. I think that's the clear cut to me best option that feels realistic. After that, you want to say Rahal, but they've struggled at Indy, and I don't think Rossi wants to go to a team where you don't feel confident in their Indy 500 package. And then Prima is a complete unknown.
I think if the money's right, if the length of contract is right for Alexander Rossi, he needs to agree to that MSR deal, even if he has to give some concessions in terms of money. Maybe it's more incentive-laden and performance-based. But a team of Felix Rosenqvist and Alexander Rossi for that team for next year with the Ganassi partnership, that's pretty solid.
That's a really good team. You have 2 capable race-winning IndyCar drivers, which is more than you can say about most teams.
Very true.
And then I posted this poll, biggest villain in IndyCar right now. 84% of you said Newgarden. Basically 16% of you said Ferrucci. A lot of replies. OBX Jody said Newgarden isn't a villain. He just does what it takes to win. He knows what the equation is to win in certain settings. He does it like a robot would. A robot doesn't factor right or wrong. They just follow their programming. Robots don't apologize. They just perform their task. Jeremy from HBG said, never heard a single accusation that Ferrucci was cheating. Lynn_IndyCar said, had to be Newgarden. No more bus bros. Unfollowed everyone, including his wife on social media. Pushed the pass gate. Attitude and his restart caused the Reddit gateway. Hunter's Way 67 said, you really have to ask. Great point. FitJ1983 said IndyCar needs villains, willpower throwing temper tantrums, and Palou having no concept of honor. They oddly aren't villains. That title has been thrust on the shoulders of Newgarden and Ferrucci. In sports, villains win a lot. Vicky Lynn 26.
But I think that makes a villain sometimes, or helps build a villain.
Yes.
People look at Tom Brady, the GOAT, as a villain.
He was a villain for a lot of people.
Right? Now, people point to Deflategate as a reason, but if Deflategate happens and Tom Brady is a middling quarterback, nobody cares.
Correct.
And that's similar where some people are at with Josef Newgarden, is people think that, or this happened, plus he wins a lot, that makes you a villain.
Vicky Lynn 26. Santucci has had a few moments here and there, but Josef Newgarden has been involved in something or other every race. BK Hickey said not even a contest at this point. CJ9 said Ferrucci isn't good enough to be the villain. Fair, you got to win races. Big O 1959 said, what kind of a stupid poll? Newgarden did absolutely nothing. Look at the data. Now one man running around blaming everyone on the track but himself.
Well, I think before this race you could have that
now,
poll
to be
too.
fair, as Marshall Pruitt pointed out, Power Newgarden were good. They were on a boat on a lake on like Monday. So
I am really, two things. I think you look at, first, can you imagine even having this poll a year ago, let alone it being as lopsided?
No, it would clearly would have been Ferrucci.
Yes. And two, I really am going to miss Will Power's temper tantrums when he retires. Now, we say he's newly zen, right? But it was vintage Will Power we saw on Saturday night. And if you didn't see it with Dylan Welsh was kind of going for an interview, and Will Power was all animated, and he turns and says F off to Dylan Welsh. Now, then he realized who it was, and then he stopped and gave the interview. But it's like, man, that's vintage Will Power.
You don't get that from another driver.
No, you don't.
And then flipping off Oriol Servia, the pace car driver.
Did he flip off Oriol Servia or did he flip off Josef Newgarden?
I assumed it was Newgarden.
I thought so too. Now Marshall said it was Servia, but I thought it was Josef Newgarden.
And ironically,
because Oriol Servia wouldn't be on the track for the restart. So I think it was Josef Newgarden that got flipped off.
I would agree. And also, wasn't it like the anniversary weekend of the infamous 2011 Move That Block 225 at New Hampshire Motor Speedway?
The double bird. So, yeah, it just maybe he found his inner New Hampshire 2011 because that was vintage Will Power, and definitely going to miss that when he's done.
Is the MoveThatBlock.com like the most random race title sponsorship that IndyCar's ever had?
It's up there. That's for sure. I mean,
I don't know why I still remember this information. Like, it's completely useless.
When you want to advertise something, you want people to remember it.
Yeah.
And I guess it worked.
I don't know if the site even still exists.
Maybe for all the wrong reasons, but we remember.
BM Wire Cap said, no Will Power to put a guy in the wall. Yeah, that's fair. But I think Newgarden and Ferrucci, the two drivers fans talk about.
But Newgarden has definitely usurped Ferrucci this season.
MoveThatBlock.com does work.
Really?
Yeah.
How about that?
Moving and storage. So there you go. That's a look at the mailbag. A lot of good entries this week, as always. And we will move on to news and notes. And I guess we pick back up with silly season discussion. So we talked about Alexander Rossi. His dad's 90% confident he'll land in a full-time ride. We talk about Auto Nation could be out at Meyer-Shank. Meyer-Shank didn't offer David Malukas a contract yet. I think they plan to. Callum Ilott, rumored to get the nod at Prima. Robert Schwartzman could be the other driver there. Basically, what else have we missed? Oh, Stingray Robb has possibilities. So it was a good article by Nathan Brown in the Indy Star kind of talking about where things are at. And, you know, we told you Ferrucci's quote last week that he wasn't very positive, but it seems like things have changed. Now, the interesting tidbit in Nathan Brown's article that I think would throw us all for a loop, Brown said multiple sources in the paddock have told IndyStar that Malukas' part-time gig with Meyer-Shank Racing to finish the season in the number 66 Honda was secured by significant funding, presumably from his family's coffers. Now that goes against everything we thought we knew, right?
Correct.
You got the McLaren ride just on merit, and then we assume we got the Shank ride to just run out the season and hopefully get that car back in the leader circle. But that goes against that.
And also Malukas being a Penske signing.
Yes. Now that I speculated last week.
Which has been confirmed by Marshall Pruitt in this week's mailbag. Basically, Malukas is being paid by Penske and is being loaned out to Foyt, part of that technical alliance for next year. So,
and I would presume sponsors as well.
Correct. So are we looking at David Malukas as looked upon as a replacement for a retiring Will Power in 2026? Maybe.
I think that's the clear line of thinking for Penske. Now, what I do find surprising is he's this high on a driver who still hasn't won a race.
Well,
now you could say, well, Alex Blow didn't win a race before he got to Ganassi, but that was like kind of a dire situation because Ganassi needed a driver. Felix Rosenqvist left to McLaren, right? And for Palou, I mean, that was his lifeline. Like that right. Move gave him a lifeline, and Chip took a risk. Obviously, it's worked out quite well.
Well, I mean, you signed Scott McLaughlin coming over from Supercars, who really needed a learning curve.
True.
In IndyCar, so
that didn't matter either.
And didn't matter.
But it's rare though that these teams sign drivers who haven't won a race.
Very true. But could we see a little changing? I mean, as we look at maybe Tim Cindric having more of an input, is he more willing to do some of that? Does Penske want to get to a point where they truly have a de facto junior team that they can run drivers at? I think they look at that maybe more of an option than being in Indy Lights.
And then where could Stingray Robb land up? Well, Nathan Brown's saying options include a return to Coyne as well as a ride at Juncos. Look, Juncos needs the funding, and do we have two kind of paying drivers at Juncos next year? It wouldn't surprise me.
With the issues that team has, wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Now, what does that mean for Romain Grosjean? That's one I think we're not talking about that I think will play into something here. I'd like to say he's back at Juncos, but funding obviously is a huge part of it.
And I thought I saw something where he's been hearing from other teams. So there's just so much out there to still be decided. And there's a lot of drivers and not as many spots for those drivers. We're going to figure out what happens. But the importance of these final four races, maybe we know who's going to win the championship, and Alex Palou are both confident in saying that. But similar to Linus Lundqvist's drive last Saturday, is who are some of these guys that are kind of on the bubble for next year going to have a good finish to the season that's going to turn into a full-time opportunity for 2025?
Yeah, there's so many moving parts still at this point. Are there any other silly season kind of notes? I think that's really kind of...
I think we touched on most everything that we've heard and
basically
read.
Everything. Now we get into... What do you want to get to first? Charters? International races?
Let's tackle charters here.
Okay. So the draft is out. It's apparently 40 pages. We don't really have a lot of details, but invitations based on the 2023 Entrance Championship. So Prima wouldn't get the leader circle. And what I'm confused is, are they out period of leader circle? Or is that still on a rotating basis?
It's a good question, and figuring out what that's going to mean. It sounds like the majority of the charter system has been set, and the teams are basically trying to find issues with their legal teams and all that with the potential proposal.
Now, the thing that is fascinating is the cap on 3 drivers per entry, which would really hurt Coyne.
Correct. But here's the thing, and we read this too in the mailbag, is some of these initiatives, per Marshall Pruitt, back up the belief that he has that IndyCar is purposely trying to lower the car count in IndyCar and trying to trim the fat, so to speak. And it's a very polarizing topic, because for every person like me that says this series doesn't need any more than 24 cars, there are people that say the more cars, the better. And from what Marshall Pruitt says, sounds like the series is thinking that 22 to 24 car range is the perfect size for its fields, its non-Indy 500 fields. Whether you agree or disagree is leading to a lot of discussion, but it sounds like that's kind of where Penske Corp is leaning. They don't want 27, 28, 29 cars at events. They'd much rather have 22, 23, 24. They want quality over quantity, whether you like it or not.
Now, the easiest way to narrow the field is finally introduce a new car. I mean, it's not that hard.
This is the thing is, and I know Scott or Marshall Pruitt said it.
Like they're having to go through all this legalese, and for something they said was supposed to be done, by the Indy 500 by like Carb Day,
right?
And now teams can give feedback through the end of August, and then do we have a decision by Nashville?
Right.
Maybe. I don't know, but it's way too complicated of a process for something that doesn't need to be there. I mean, look at NASCAR and their charter system.
It's a cluster.
They're fighting over that right now.
Well, I think the team owners are appreciative because the series is trying to give them value to their spot on the grid.
The series gave them value by getting a TV deal that gives them value.
Correct. Well, we hope that works, right? But I think this is 90% beneficial to the teams as opposed to the series in terms of these. But I think it's twofold. I think it gives the team owners value in their entries, but it also could weed out some of the lower funded teams and entries as well. I know Marshall Pruitt is vocal in saying, well, based on what he knows, it just seems like IndyCar's trying to push out the Coins and the Carpenters and the Juncos of the world. And not to sound callous, but I'm kind of like, well, what are you losing if you lose those teams? Other than car count. Juncos isn't competing to win races. Carpenter's not competing to win races. I mean, we go over the moon if their driver is finishing the top 10. Look at us talking about Renus VK, 4 straight top 10s. I have differing opinions of how you get about that, but my thing is, if this series had 24 cars and every single one of those cars and teams was capable of winning a race at any time, that'd be amazing. And if Prima comes in and is really good and eventually knocks out, let's say, Coin, it sucks for Coin, but isn't that good for the competitiveness of the series and the quality of the series in terms of having those teams? I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. I know some people...
But you're doing the same thing F1's done, where you're limiting entries and creating an even more exclusive club. And I get F1 teams have their motivations with the money sharing. But for IndyCar, why turn someone away? As long as they're competitive and not at the detriment of the grid. And Coin and Carpenter are certainly not at the detriment of the grid. Yeah, they've not been competitive this year for the most part, but they're not to the detriment of other teams.
No, but how much have we talked about that there's only 2 teams that can win a championship in this series? And there's only 4 teams that can win a race. Most races.
I'd say 5, but yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. What is Coin adding? What is
getting a new formula is how you open up the series. They have this locked. In a way, IndyCar's worse than F1 because IndyCar is saying, "Hey, everyone can participate. We're going to keep the formula the same, so the same 2 teams dominate year after year."
I do think that
changing the car is way more important than charters to me.
Yeah, but I think it's also a olive branch to the team owners saying, here's something that you can tangibly sell.
Like if I'm Coin or Carpenter, where it seems like they're trying to force you out, like why would you want to participate?
Well, because I would want 2 charters that then if I am being pushed out, I can sell them for 7 figures potentially. But
do we really believe that though?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Do we really believe that?
I mean, you're going to say, okay, the charters are an asset, but they're really not, because if you're selling to a new team, not only would they have to buy the charters from you, but also they're not leader circle eligible. So why would they want to join?
But doesn't that
IndyCar's not in a position where their TV ratings and attendance are strong enough to justify, unless you're coming in with a massive amount of money and willing to spend. But there just simply aren't people out there like that.
I would think this conversation would be better off in 2 years or 3 years once you hopefully have a boost of having all your races on Fox, and you're in a more better positioned to say we want to cap it because there's so much interest and we want quality over quantity. If you have that money, that sponsorship money coming in with higher ratings. So I don't know. But I do know that at least Marshall Pruitt is of the opinion that he feels like the series is looking at it and wants to really look at the quality of the racing and is fully behind looking at 27, 28 car grids as too many.
I think that's the peak. I don't think you need to go above that.
But didn't that kind of what we said a couple of years ago when we were at 26 and we're like, yeah, 26 is a good number. Then we went to 27 and now this week we'll be at 28.
And there was talk of, do we hit 29 next year? We knew that wasn't realistic. There's always attrition. So I guess I don't think you need the charters to try to change up a system for no reason. That's just me.
My biggest thing is there's so much out there about how all these teams are barely making it, yet we have 28 cars starting this week.
Because the car's been the same essentially since 2012. Yeah, you've had different aero kits and the aero screen and now the hybrid, but the chassis is the same. That's why you have all these people participating.
And for a long time, that's why IndyCar hasn't made an initiative to update the spec because
they wanted growing car counts. Now they got it and they want to reduce it.
Well, and the team owners are pushing back on it and say, we don't have the money to do that. And I'm surprised if IndyCar is hell-bent on reducing the car counts, why they aren't like, hey, in 2027, which we've heard rumors is, 2027 is going to be a new car, deal with it. Now, that hasn't been set in stone, but it's been thrown around. I could see IndyCar doing that, and the teams are just going to have to figure it out.
All right, let's talk NASCAR and IndyCar. First off, officially confirmed Lee Diffie taking over as the lead play-by-play voice on TV for the NASCAR Cup Series for NBC Sports starting this weekend at Daytona. Rick Allen will move to Xfinity. Kevin Lee will call IndyCar for the rest of the year. That's not really a surprise. Also, with that, we saw, and this is really cool, and I'll be curious if NBC does this for IndyCar, but they're doing NASCAR nonstop for Super Speedway racing at Daytona, Atlanta, and Talladega on NBC and USA, showing live coverage of every green flag lap at those tracks, and starting this weekend. So that's fascinating. Then you have this. So there was a leak of a potential NASCAR 2025 schedule from NASCAR's Spanish language page, NASCAR Latino. They posted what appears to be the Cup schedule, that from Adam Stern, then deleted it. What's interesting is it includes Mexico City on the schedule, and that race would be run on June 8th. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, isn't it super hot in Mexico? Well, Mexico City's like a mile above sea level,
yeah,
right?
It's elevated, so
they'll be fine. And then adding fuel to that rumor, so that post was deleted. Then we see today, this courtesy of Hickey93, Matt Hickey, friend of the show, it found a post. Obviously, I had to translate it, but there will be a press conference on Tuesday at the Hermanos Rodriguez racetrack. And then according to someone else with a different entity, it'll be about the return of IndyCar to the Mexican capital, although it is not ruled out that it will be the arrival of NASCAR. That is at the expense of the Mexico GP of F1. So now the F1 schedule for 2025 is set. Mexico's on it. So does that mean we get, does this mean they're dropping F1 next year? Does this mean that next year is the last year of F1? And then they go to IndyCar in 26, and then NASCAR gets added next year as well.
Now, this is a concrete report that this is coming Wednesday? Next Wednesday?
Tuesday.
Next Tuesday that this is going to be announced?
Yes.
Could we potentially see a NASCAR race in 2025 and then a NASCAR and an IndyCar race in 2026?
I think so.
Now, there was rumors out there that the Clash for NASCAR was going to be in Mexico for next season.
And then instead they went to a track in North Carolina, Bowman Gray Stadium. Here's my thing with the Clash. You do something different and we praise you. Now you just take it to a short track in North Carolina. And like, yes, I get that.
Which is like a really short track.
Yes. And I get it. It's a unique venue, but you're not reaching new fans. The whole point of the Clash and moving it was going out to new audiences.
Well, and I think it was a cool thing with North Wilkesboro and now that being on the schedule. That's cool. But now they're going to go to Bowman Gray Stadium, which is a 1/4-mile track in Winston-Salem. Like, how are you... Now, how many like, they have heats and stuff on the Clash, right? I can't imagine the LA Coliseum was much bigger than a 1/4 mile. I don't know. Like, but to your point, I agree with you. Like, when is too much? When is a lot of diversity too much? I guess. Like, you have North Wilkesboro, that's fine. This Bowman Gray Stadium hasn't had a cup race since 1971. I don't know what that's doing for me. I guess the purists, and it's huge for North Carolina. I get it, but I don't know. NASCAR seems to be just trying anything and everything and seeing what sticks, and some things do stick and other things are just like,
Is NASCAR wise in going back to their southeast roots? Just like IndyCar is trying to be more, they're adding more races in the Midwest?
I don't think it hurts NASCAR. I'm interested. Was this the best option for the Clash for 2025? Maybe it was. But I thought the North Wilkesboro push kind of checked the box for that historic track in the South, in the Upper South, didn't it? But I guess not.
I would think so.
Who knows?
Elsewhere in TV news, so Venue Sports shut down for now. It's set to launch.
Didn't last very long, did it?
Shortly, but they have a hurdle after there's a preliminary injunction that has halted the launch of Venue Sports. We'll see what happens. Look,
this is not IndyCar's fault, okay?
No,
and there's some
IndyCar
people that
has
already
nothing to do with it.
This is already people writing into mailbag and stuff complaining about this and calling like video game-esque type issues. This is not IndyCar's. This is the thing, guys. Just get cable. Just get YouTube TV. Get Hulu TV. Get something to you have Fox and FS1.
You can literally split YouTube TV like at least four ways.
We do it. We have to. Yeah. I just got my bill from Nathan this morning for my $18.
I just sent mine yesterday
for YouTube TV. It's not that much money, people. If you really love this sport, just pay the money.
And you know what? If you don't want to do that, get a VPN and you can do IndyCar Live. Just set it to one of the countries that's not available. We've gone over this many times.
We have, and
this is Fubo that's trying to block it because they obviously have skin in the game as well.
Right.
So that's why it's going that way. And this will play out in the courts over a long time. Will we have some sort of resolution by March of next year? Probably.
We've said it before, and this is kind of my last word on it, at least for this week, is what's best for the series isn't always going to be best for the consumer. The best thing for the series right now for 2025 is every single one of their races on on Fox and Indy Lights races on FS1, qualifying and practice on FS1. That's the best thing for the sport to grow. It may not be the best thing for some consumers,
and it's the best thing in the short term. 5 years from now, yes, you need a better streaming package. I don't disagree.
But it's just,
But look at Peacock. They keep raising rates, and rightfully so, because they're getting more properties.
And
they have Big Ten football and basketball. They're getting the NBA in a couple of years. Their rates are going up.
So just, if you value the sport, support the sport. Because the deal that IndyCar got from Fox is immeasurably better for the sport and the potential growth of the sport going forward. It is inconveniently some people, but that's life. You deal with it. Just shut up and pay the money. I mean, it's just like, I'm tired of the complaining.
Yes.
Just shut up and support the sport.
You can't ask for anything more. A couple other quick notes, and we'll preview Portland. Congrats to friend of the show, Rob Howden, inducted into the Go-Kart Hall of Fame.
Nice.
So very well deserved. And this tidbit Nathan Brown had that he said he didn't put in a story, but fun random fact from an interview last fall that never saw the light of day. Colton Herta worked a pair of 12-hour days as a self-described carny last fall up in Massachusetts making elephant ears. First job of his life outside racing.
I love elephant ears.
Right? You know what's funny? In Texas, they don't have elephant ears. It's funnel cakes.
It's funnel cakes, right? Which are different.
Yes, very different.
Yes.
Elephant ears are great. Funnel cakes are fine.
Now, funnel cakes, are they more like, it's more like powdered.
Yeah, powdered sugar on top,
Sugar.
and then it's kind of like stringy, like
Yeah.
fried. Whereas, an elf ear is obviously just a big, flat, kind of round, oval-shaped
With
cinnamon sugar. Oh,
yeah.
so good.
Love the elephant ears.
Now I want an elf ear.
I do too. We'll hit up Colton Earth to see if he can make us one.
Today, anniversary of the 2020 Indy 500. Of course, cannot talk. Takuma Sato won.
In front of dozens.
Yes. And with that, time to preview Portland. Our 3 key stats from Chad 200. Dixon finished third in each of the last 3 Portland races. Newgarden 3 top 5s and 5 starts, but Max Chilton has led more laps than him here. Alex Blow 2 wins, a pole, 98 laps led, and 3 Portland starts. We take a look at the schedule for the BitNile.com Grand Prix of Portland. So practice. So we record here on a Friday. So practice 1, all times Eastern. We'll kick off 5:55 to 7:10. Peacock, IndyCar Live, Sirius XM, IndyCar Radio. Usual outlets. On Saturday, practice 2, 12 to 1 Eastern. And then qualifying 3:30 to 5 Eastern. And then there's another practice, 8:15 to 8:45 Saturday evening. And then the race window 3 to 6 on USA and Peacock. Obviously, that would be noon to 3 Pacific, with green flag approximately 3:20 Eastern.
All right. So about 15, 20
Who's
minutes.
your pick? I'm going Dixon.
Well, I was thinking, I'm going to go Alex Palou. I think he puts an emphatic exclamation point on wrapping up this points race. What little left of it there is.
I think what's also interesting is Penske's won all the ovals so far this year, so this is Palou's last shot to really put a stamp on the title race. All right, tweets of the week. The first one is really just any of Scott McLaughlin's tweets on Jersey Shore.
Man, I've been locked
I don't
in.
even think I watched more than a handful of minutes of that show back when it was on, but I feel like I'm watching the show through him.
Yes,
it's
him
great.
live tweeting and me knowing enough about Jersey Shore, especially in the early seasons.
I know most of the characters.
Right. It's just hysterical. And he's spot on with so much of his stuff. And yeah, it's been enjoyable this week to read those.
And then the other tweet from Alexander Rossi, we had a good one going, only for nothing in the end. The good news from last night is my Christmas card list got shorter by at least 2, maybe 3. We'll see how I feel come December. Remember, he's had some cryptic tweets. He had a great quote talking about Outback Steakhouse.
Right, yep.
Where it's, qualifying was fine.
It was, what did he say? It didn't give you food like Outback. Didn't give you food poisoning. It wasn't terrible enough, but it's not like you're going to go back or something like that.
Yes. And then he's just had some random tweets, a beluga whale, 3 apple emojis.
Yeah, everybody's kind of cryptically
I think he's just messing with everyone.
Yeah, probably. But
and I don't blame him.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
all right, time for our random split error driver of the week.
All right, we are going to go back to the 2000 season in the IRL, and a guy that a lot of people know from stock cars, Jason Leffler.
Ooh.
Who's some people may not realize was an open wheel driver. He started 3 races in the IRL in 1999 and 2000. His first race was at Walt Disney World in 1999, finishing 28th. He also started Vegas in 2000 and then qualified and started 17th in the 2000 Indianapolis 500 for Treadway Racing. And then, interestingly, the year after that 2000 season, raced for Chip Ganassi Racing in Sprint Cup, then Sprint Cup in NASCAR, and had a long
Well, no, that
career.
would have been Nextel Cup.
Was it? Yes, Nextel Cup back then. So yeah, he started his career in stock cars in 2001. He started 73 races in NASCAR Cup Series / Nextel Cup, and close to 300 races in the Xfinity Series. He had raced in the 1999 Xfinity Series in addition to his start at Walt Disney World Speedway, but only did 3 races over 2 years in IndyCar. And actually, I forgot about this. He, in 2013, passed away. He was in a sprint car race at Bridgeport Speedway in New Jersey. His car, with a couple laps to go, was running second. He suffered a front suspension failure, crashed into a wall, flipped several times. He lost consciousness in the race, and he was not breathing when he was extricated. He was pronounced dead 30 minutes after the accident. Autopsy reported cause of death was a severe blunt force neck and spine injury. So after his passing, a lot of NASCAR drivers and IndyCar drivers that had competed with him had kind things to say about Jason Leffler. So a lot of people that remember him from his stock car days got his start, or at least dabbled, in open wheel. Again, 3 races over 2 years, a 17th place start and finish in the 2000 Indianapolis 500.
And a great short track driver, National Midget Auto Racing Hall of Fame. He was inducted there in 2003.
19 he's in the USAC Hall of Fame.
USAC National Championship Midget wins. And yes, inducted into the USAC Hall of Fame posthumously in 2018. 6 USAC Silver Crown wins. So all-around racer. And, it's wild. I was looking at, I guess it does say Sprint Cup because 2001, I guess it eventually became Sprint Cup at the time. But a lot of D&Qs.
Yeah.
Because they had, so many entries back
right.
then.
I mean, back when they had to cut it
when
to 43.
When they had 43.
Right.
He didn't qualify for Sonoma when he was with Chip Ganassi Racing, or Dover, or Atlanta, or looks like there's one other track, Martinsville that season. I mean, it was hard. And
yeah, those early 2000s when you had 47,
that
48
was the
cars showing up to race.
Peak of NASCAR from 98 to 2003, 2004. To be with Chip Ganassi Racing and be with other teams in that era, I mean, it was very competitive. And for him to have some opportunities, obviously just a really good short track driver, and that's where kind of he made his career, but obviously a long career in Cup, running a lot of races, and then Nationwide / Xfinity, whatever we're supposed to call it these days, as well.
So, unfortunately passed away in June of 2013 at age 37. Jason Leffler, a native of Long Beach, California, this week's Random Split Era Driver of the Week.
All right, that does it for us. We'll be back next week to recap the BitNile.com Grand Prix of Portland from Portland International Raceway. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. This has been New Track Record Podcast.